is extremely difficult. I think back to my first work through the prison, my deeply embedded assumption, my lack of knowledge, my misinformation. However, the researcher's familiarity with the context does not always guarantee that the research conducted will be any less hazardous to the participant than the research directed by someone stepping in from the outside for a brief encounter. Different risks evolve as researcher and context change. Cade Applauso and Cam Willett suggest that to look twice is to practice respect. However, the double look must be an informed look, a look supported by a critical reflexibility similar to the one introduced previously as a theme. The critical lens that students apply to the research preface will encourage response, questions that are often more easily ignored than examined, such as research and critical research practice cannot always be fully understood at the initial stage of research. The researcher's knowledge, the methodological choices, research focus, and participants will influence the process that unfolds. Currently, student researchers in Canadian university context who choose to conduct research with human participants have to complete an ethnic tutorial and an ethics review process at their institution before proceeding. When students complete the requirement, they are better informed about the institutional instance on ethical conduct when researching with human participants. However, in addition to understanding the principle articulated in institutional policy, respectfully preface requires a contextual sensitivity on the parties of the student researchers. Researchers practicing respect will be aware that issues of ethical import cannot be fully addressed through a process that occurs in isolation of the unfolding of the research process and all the expected experience that processing of the research process and all the expected experience that all process entails, e.g. IRA 210, Tompkison 205.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. I'm gonna, if that's okay with you, I'll ask you to pause for a second, and I'll ask maybe someone else to continue, just to give someone else also a chance to read, Mohammed. But thank you so much for that first part. So if anyone else wants to continue from where Mohammed left us off, that would be great. Does anyone else want to take over? If not, Mohammed, you're welcome to continue if no one else wants to take over.
Okay. In the case
I think I can take over.
Okay, so continue more.
That's okay. Thank you, Mohammed. Maybe that way everyone else gets a chance to read as well.
Mohammed,
I'd like for that to happen. Omot, I think was it you?
Yes.
Please, if you'd like. Thank you again, Mohammed.
Yes, it was me. It was.
Go for it, Omot. From in the case of women, if you can. Can you see it?
Hello, Mirko.
Omot, can you hear me?
Hello.
Omot?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, Mirko. Yes. Hello.
Omot, so if you can read from in the case of women in prisons.
Yes, let me start from there.
Sawa.
Hello?
Sawa,
yes.
Omot. Go for it.
Okay. In the case of women in prison, they are infertilized their decisions and laws. When researching in the prison, I needed to be sensitive about not doubly exposing the women to a patronizing gaze through my added lens as a researcher. Respect can be demonstrated when student researchers understand the fine line between supporting and enabling participants' rights to make their own decisions and patronizing them. Recognizing this fine line can become socially difficult or as well as very important when participants fit within institutionally imposed categories of risk and vulnerability, including people with physical and intellectual disabilities, children, students in schools and prisons or prisoners. In the qualitative research courses I currently teach to encourage students to keep practicing respect to take a moment and reflect on the research they are designing or have conducted in the past. Knowing what they know
Omot? We lost you, I think.
about the research, they actually need to ask themselves why and to use their responses to help them revise their research plans and process.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Omot. So we can stop there because this is actually the section that I wanted to read with you today. And although it's short, it's just, as you can tell, it's just a page really. I think it captures really, really well some of the tensions and some of the challenges of what it means to do respectful research. So a research project that is respectful of people, right? Especially, obviously, we're talking about participants here. So what do you take from this? So, and I mean, of course, not just Mohammed and Omot that read for us. So, and thank you again, both of you, for the excellent reading. But not just you, but everyone. What do you take from this? What are some of the key ideas or some of the thoughts that you were left with after listening or reading this piece? And anyone is welcome to start us off in conversation, in a sense.
Yeah.
Hassan, is that you?
Yes, it's me.
Go for it, Hassan.
Actually, we have understood from the reading that some things that need to some of the possible risks that is involved in conducting research. Maybe some factors we need to consider: the consent of the person, the willingness of the participants, and whether or not this kind of research you are conducting is going to cause harm the individual participants. Whether you are asked, will you have involved or maybe involved your family members or persons whom you love most? If the answer is no, that means you revise the kind of the questionnaires or the research you want to ask. That means the possible risks when it comes to institutions, when it comes to researchers, when it comes to the topic itself, the sensitivity of the research is what the piece is more or less talking about. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hassan. I think I heard Omot. Am I wrong?
No.
No, it wasn't Omot. Sorry.
I will come in later. Let my colleagues say something
No,
first.
absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Omot. Sorry about that. I thought I heard your voice, but I was wrong.
No problem.
Mohammed, did you want to say something? Perhaps maybe I saw your square light up, I think. But I think Mohammed's on mute.
I think I will add one or two things that
yes,
I have.
Go Hassan, please.
Yes. Yeah, that means from the reading that the research should cause no harm to the participants is what we can summarize, and it will also respect the consent or the willingness of the participants. Should not force you. Ask if the participants is if willing to contribute and take part research or not. If the person turns down, obviously you respect the idea. If the person maybe stops you or maybe decided not to answer a particular question, you go ahead and you not enforce. That is more of what we mean by a respectful research. Thank you.
Those are definitely some very good points, Hassan. Yeah, and they're also very detailed points in the sense that really pointing out some of the specifics as you move ahead in the sense of the research process and in the research stages, right? So, for example, you brought some good examples of the moment of interviewing, for example, right? The moment of the interviews and how you interact with participants, whether you force questions or whether the participants always have the right to decline, for example, to respond to specific questions, and that is you cannot, like you said, you cannot force, right, people to do something which is against their consent. So some really, really good points, definitely about consent, harm. I like the idea of harm, bringing harm, and definitely and risk as well. They said, there's always risk, right, in doing research, both for the participants as well as for the researcher in interesting ways. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about that. But I did want to hear from others as well. Omot, I think if you wanted to say something, I think at this point, go ahead, because...
No, I think my friend Hassan said a crucial point, and I dare to also add some. Like the reading that I read, the part that I read, to my view or vantage, is about what kind of research formats that a researcher would have. This format is what Hassan talked about. And to my view, allowing participants to take decision, not only taking part, but also allowing them to decide on whether they are willing to do or to participate in a research as their focus or focal point, up to what I'm referring them to have the right of deciding to participate. My point is speeding at decision, because the book says they need to be having a right of deciding or recognitions for their participation. If I want to go and repeat it, it says here, recognizing this fine line can become especially difficult. For example, if they are not allowed to decide and a researcher, dictate the way he's supposed or she's supposed to work in the field, this one will be hazardous to the researcher, even the participants, because there is nothing to be called or to view as a respectful researcher. A researcher should allow the participants or should read the condition, the environment, and learn from the situation so that he or she can work well with the environment, not only participants, also the condition that he or she not to be in. I'm talking of cultural perspectives and social perspective of the focal person or areas that this person is going to do a respectful research. And this starts from the design. The format or design should come first, and based on the situation of the environment or kind of people that he or she going to ask or to work with. So this is very important area that a researcher or a student who is thinking of going to the field need to think about the research design and also the format, and also the actual permission and also decision of participants of his area or her area of research.
Absolutely, Amot. And I like this. This you bring up a really good point. So in a sense, Hassan, for example, Hassan began by speaking about the risk, in a sense, right? The risk that there is and the harm that can be done to people, but mostly about this idea of consent. And I think you echoed this Amot as well in your points. This idea of the importance of consent, of asking people is if they're willing to participate. But what you've also added is another element of what you said is the design, is in the design. So the design of the research, the format you called it, but it really, and then you said the design of the research, it needs to account for the cultural perspectives. It needs to be respectful of both the cultural perspective of the researcher. So the researcher needs to be aware of his own cultural perspectives, as well as the researcher needs to be aware of the cultural perspectives and social perspectives of those that he is researching or she is researching, right? So those participants.
Okay.
And I think those are all excellent points. Mohammed, was that you?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Maybe. Thank you very much. To add on what my colleagues have said, so there's one key element you need to consider when conducting this back-to-back research. That is ethical certificate.
Mm-hmm.
The university that maybe you are doing for the research should maybe a guarantee for you, maybe to have maybe to conduct a research. At least you have that certificate of ethics.
Uh-huh. Mohammed, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to I have observed in my way the battle that I've read.
Absolutely, Mohammed, and that is another element in a sense to the discussion and the conversation, which is the
hello,
ethics tutorial. Yeah, absolutely. Abukar, please chime in.
Micro. I want you to clarify for me the difference between the ethical certificate that Mohammed is talking about and the authorization letter, research authorization letter. Are they the same or they're different?
Okay. Abukar, before I answer that, can I ask you, what do you mean by authorization letter?
You know, this authorization letter, it's a letter that is written by the institution, or the university, whether it's a college or university, then it will give you the authority to do the research. Then you will take that document to wherever you are taking the research, or if you are doing a project, then it will help you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Hassan.
Yeah, actually, we are living in a different context, and we have pursued the education from different institutions. Me and Abukar pursued from
Hassan, come closer to the microphone because we can't hear you right now.
Yes.
Much
How
better.
about now?
Yeah, much better. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm saying we are talking of different contexts and different institutions. Different institutions have different, formatting and different procedures of conducting research. Maybe from the experience of Kenyatta University is what Mas Abukar is talking about, and it is actually true that in the previous, before graduation, we are involved in projects where we were assigned in a given particular schools. And then before that, there were this authorization letter indicating that we are researchers from Kenyatta University wants to do something, carry out a project in this particular area. That is the authorization letter that Abukar is talking about. But from the this particular part of certification, ethical certification, this might be talking about in the context of Canada, maybe the university procedures in the context of York University, Canada, for students who are carrying out research there in Canada with diverse communities and diverse, cultural ethnicities and whatsoever. From my understanding, thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. No, thank you, Hassan. No, please. No. This is very, very productive, and it's really good in a sense what you're pointing out. And you did capture some of what I was gonna say actually, Hassan. respond to Abuka's question. So I think I will start with Abuka's question because it's quite good because it gets us to begin to think of some of the complexities that I did want to tease out. So we'll start with Abuka's question. So Abuka's question was, what is the difference between the ethical certificate and authorization letter? So that's a good question. So the authorization letter, really, what in for you, what will it look like for you in a sense, or as future researchers, for your MRP? So the authorization letter really in New York takes the form of an email. That's all it is. So what will happen is once you present your project, your research project, obviously in its MRP proposal form, not right now, but later on, by the end of the summer or beginning of the fall, when you will present your final proposal in a sense, right, to the ethic board here in York University. What they'll say is they'll tell you, they'll give you a final approval. They'll tell you when the proposal is ready, in a sense, to be approved, and that's when you can begin to do your research. So when you're talking about authorization, Abuka, that will be your authorization, in the sense that the ethic board in Toronto, in York University, will give you an approval to begin your research, that you can actually begin to conduct your research. When they find that you've satisfied all of the ethical requirements, in a sense, to begin your research. Now, in terms of the ethics certificate, that is one of the requirements of your ethics for your research project. So what do I mean by that? So when you'll be doing your MRP proposal, you'll be sending in a few things. And Hassan actually had touched upon some of these, and Amat as well, when they were talking about consent. So when you, alongside your MRP proposal, which you'll be sending in to York University with your professor, when we'll get to that stage, alongside this MRP proposal, you'll be also sending a certificate of completion of an ethics of this ethic tutorial. It's called TCPS2, and what it is a series of modules. It's a series of modules to be completed online that sort of give you some background information and questions about what it means to engage with populations which are often marginalized and oppressed, right? And so that's all it is. It's basically a series of modules that you complete, and by the end of that, you get a certificate that basically says Amat or Mohammed or Abukar or Hassan has completed the TCP2 ethics certificate, and so it's like a check mark in a sense, right? Like, check, you completed that, great. And so you include that certificate with your MRP proposal, right? To show that you've had some thinking and thoughts and about what it means to do ethical research. Now, Susan Tilley, though, is telling us that is not sufficient, of course, right? She's telling us that is just one step of the process. And in fact, when you do hand in the MRP proposal, the certificate is not the only other document that you hand in. In fact, there's a series of other documents that you also will be handing in on the side as well. And they're called the ethic package. And what it means, what these includes and what this means are a few things. So it includes a consent form. So you will have to draft a consent form for your participants, right? In which you ask for a consent to participate in the research, and you tell them what the research is about and whether they are willing to take part in it, and then they have to sign it. So you'll have a consent form. You will also have in this ethic package, and this speaks a little bit to authorization as well, Abukar. You will also have some letters that you might have to have ready. So you might have written to have ready to give for recruitment purposes. So they're usually called recruitment letters. So these might look like letters that you send to a school if you're looking for students. They might look as like an ad. It might look like an email ad that you might send by email to friends and colleagues that might be interested in participating in your research. They might look like official letters to be sent to principals, to school principals, or to parents to have authorization again to interview their children or teachers or whatever the case may be that your research implies, or whoever participant you're looking to bring into your research. So in a sense, to answer your question, Abubakar, the authorization letter will look different according to your research, because it's a combination of an approval that you get from ethics, as well as a series of forms that you've completed in a sense, and that you can show whoever it is that you're interviewing, basically, including the consent forms. So the forms are consent forms, recruitment letters, human participant research form. We'll have a look at all of these. Don't worry, Abubakar. Right now, I'm mentioning them, but obviously, as in the continuation of the course, we're going to actually look at the HPRC form, the consent form, the recruitment letters, and all of this. We'll have a look at some samples, and we'll have a look at what those mean. But just to say that, so the authorization letter that you speak of is actually composed of many documents. It's not just one document, in a sense. Among these documents is also the ethics certificate, which is, again, it's just a certificate that you completed, that says that you completed this ethic tutorial, which we'll also talk about in the future. Does this answer your question, Abubakar?
Yeah.
So I hope this answers the question. So in a sense, there's a variety of documents that you'll have to prepare alongside your MRP proposal. Among these are the ethics certificate, and among these are also all these documents that I mentioned: consent form, HPRC form, recruitment letters, etc., etc., etc. These are all forms. But what Susan Tilley is telling us, though, is a little bit more complex than that, right? And I think it has a lot to do with what Omar, you were mentioning before as well, in terms of the cultural perspectives. I think that's very, very important. It's crucial that we speak about that. So yes, ethics review, yes, the ethics review process, as well as the ethics certificate that Mohammed mentioned. Those are, Susan Tilley tells us, are the first step in doing an ethical and respectful research, but they are not at all the end point, right? They are just a step into it. And this is what Susan Tilley is telling us, right? She's telling us, she gives us this example, which perhaps is an example that might ring true to many of you. So she tells us that in her case, remember, she did research with women in prison, right? Remember, she tells us this at many points in her book. And she tells us, in the case of women in prison, they are infantilized. They are no longer permitted to make everyday decisions and lose control over determining what they can do with their lives. So when researching in the prison, I needed to be sensitive about not doubly exposing the women to a patronizing gaze through my added lens as researcher. What is she talking about here? Does anyone want to try? So what does she mean, for example, by patronizing gaze or being infantilized? Because those two words are connected, right? Infantilized and patronizing gaze.
Answer.
So what does she mean by this, Susan Tilley? What do you take from this? What do you take to mean? What is the meaning of being infantilized or a patronizing gaze? And how can that happen as a researcher? How can we produce a patronizing gaze over someone, or how can we infantilize someone with our research? How can that happen?
Hello?
Yeah, Hassan, is that you?
Yes.
Ah, you're speaking from a outside. Okay. Hassan, tell me, or tell us, rather.
Yeah, my phone, mine ran out of power. I think here the researcher means that these personas are people who are in a prison. They are guided people. They are patroned by individuals, and they are required not to do something or to avoid something. That means the researcher is now saying that his activities will not expose dangers to the participants, or should not worsen the relationship between the guidance people who are patrolling them, or maybe it will not risk the participants to get maybe penalized by the people who are now in charge, people who are patrolling them. I think that the issue will not bring attention or maybe escalate the living situation of the personas, or maybe worsen the relationship between the patronus and the personas. Thank you.
That really good point. Really good point, Hassan. So you're speaking about the relationship between, for example, guards and prisoners, right? That's to give an example, and how in a sense our research might impact that by maybe making it worse. And so this is something to be considered. So what you're talking really about is power relations, for example, right, Hassan? And that's a really good point. As researchers, we need to be really aware of the power dynamics of our participants, as well as the people they interact with. That is an excellent point, and that's something we have to be really careful about, because we need to really make sure that because sometimes we really what we want to do as researchers, especially maybe most of you who are very concerned with justice, right, with justice and equity, which is crucially and vastly important. But the danger sometimes in that, and I think you said this, Hassan, the danger in it is that we might in wanting to do something good, in a sense, for these people, wanting to help, we might make things worse, in a sense. We might upset power dynamics, and which is part of what we want to do, but it's also the way in which we do it. We need to be very careful, in a sense. We have to be very careful, and part of this comes through with the representations that we make people, right? So Hassan, you said, for example, that these women in this prison are always guided. Their decisions are made for them, right? So that's a really good point. So what prisoners don't get the right to choose where to go. Prisoners don't get the right to choose where to move. They're told where to move, where to go. Their freedom of mobility, the freedom to move, the freedom of movement is restricted, right, to the prison. They cannot exit the prison whenever they want. I'm sure, as I'm saying this might be ringing some bells. I wonder if you're seeing some connections here between maybe the prison context and other contexts, maybe contexts that are more familiar to you. I don't know, is it ringing any bells? Are you like, maybe perhaps you want to say something to this idea of freedom of movement, for example, and restrictions on freedom of movement, because, and freedom to make decisions as well. Because, for example, I mean,
Come again.
Amat?
Yes, you said the connection or any idea connected to the idea that Hassan raised?
Yes, I was trying to analyze that a little bit further, Amat, right? I was trying to go a little bit further with that. So Hassan was mentioning the fact of being always guided, right? Always being guided, decisions, not being given the freedom to make decisions for you, for yourself, right? And I was also thinking about, so, well, these are prisoners, right? These are people that they can't decide, for example, to just leave the prison because they're in prison, right? When they're in the prison, the spaces are controlled for them, right, by guards. So they don't decide when to go wash or when to go to the yard. They're guards that tell them it's time to go to the yard, it's time to go to wash, it's time to do this, it's time to eat, right?
So we can call the refugees an open prison.
Yeah, that's right, Hassan, and that's one of the connections I was trying to make here. So you're absolutely right. Some people might say that a refugee camp is like a prison, right? And I mean, we can debate that. We can discuss the ways in which it's similar and which it's different. Of course, there are ways in which it's different too. But it is in many ways, like, what I'm trying to get at is the point that you're right, that refugee populations, just like prisoners, are very marginalized populations. Would you agree with that statement, all of you? They're very like
Yes.
I mean, there are refugees and as yourselves as well, right? I mean, are oftentimes their voices are not heard. Their decisions are made for them. I mean, we can think of the most recent case, right, with the closure of the camp, possible closure of the camps, right? I mean, your opinions are not really being taken into account many times, right? Which is extremely unfair. So what, now that you are also, but you are refugees, but you're also researchers, right? Who will be researching issues within your community of refugees. So you in a sense, you've been given a privileged position, right? To be able to state these issues, to explore these issues and challenges in the name of your community, right? And many of you are taking up this challenge, this responsibility with admirable passion and admirable responsibility and consideration. So in a sense, but what does that entail? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves, right? All of us. What does that entail? As now that you become researchers, how do you present your community in a way that's respectful, in a way that doesn't also undermine their voices, in a way that doesn't infantilize the people around you, right? In a way that doesn't just patronize them and tell them what's important and what matters and what doesn't, but in a way that's instead free, like in a way that really like empowers them, right? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, indeed, Mirko. And I wanted to say something beside
Absolutely.
this one.
Please.
I think the idea here is more of no harm approach.
Tell me more, Ahmad. Tell us more.
No harm approach means many things when she or he goes to the field, because consideration of other things must include the age category of the people that he or she going to work with. Number two is kind of people. The researcher may have a topic to do with physical or physically challenged, visual impaired, and also other things to do with hearing impairments, or we call them disabilities. With this group of people, there are a lot of vulnerability things, including thinking capacity, because they feel that they are as isolated from the community, they are undermined. So somebody who is going to the field and to work with those people should be careful and also understand that this is very important group of the community members, and they should deserve love and also caring approaches. Do no harm to any their perspectives. So prisoners, including refugees, is a category that reflecting the vulnerability issues of these people. So taking care of them starts from the design. The place that a researcher goes should be reflecting in or reflected in the design paper, so that he understand or she understand the areas that she is going and the kind of people that is going to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Ahmad. And you nailed it. You nailed exactly what I was trying to put forward, and did it in a much better way than I did. It's exactly that. It's this importance of design and of thinking about the vulnerability of the population that we are working with, basically, and how that factors in, how that impacts our design of the research. So what we're trying to achieve, for example. We might, so towards the beginning, right? Towards the beginning of the piece that we read together, Susan Tilley tells us this piece. This is actually, she's quoting herself, right? She's quoting her own work, and she's saying, I think back to my first walk through the prison, my deeply embedded assumptions, my lack of knowledge, my misinformation. right? So obviously she's telling us that she is not a prisoner. This is obvious. So she doesn't share the culture. She doesn't share the culture. She doesn't share the positionality of her participants at all, right? She's completely outside and a complete outsider to the participants. So in her case, obviously, she had to deal with trying to unlearn, relearn a lot of the things that she knew about women in prison, right? Because she had to, out of respect for her participants, because she comes in there with a lot of assumptions, right? Oh, these are people that. What are some of the assumptions that we might hold of prisoners? What are some of the assumptions that come to mind when we talk about prisoners? Just any word that comes to mind, anything really, guys, any word. For example, I don't know, like, for example, they might be people that are violent or have committed violent crimes or bad. They're bad, right? They're bad people because they've been put in prison, so therefore they must be bad. They must have done something that's terrible, right? That they're paying for their mistakes in a sense, right? These are some of the assumptions that maybe someone who is not a prisoner, who has never been a prisoner, might go into a prison and think, right? But imagine if someone were to do a research with those assumptions, it would be what kind of research would that be? Would that be a respectful piece of research? I mean, I think the question is rhetorical, right? And like, it probably won't, right? It probably won't be a respectful piece of research. How could it, in a sense? So, all right, it's time for prayer. Abukar tells me. Okay. So, anyways, this is okay. I think maybe what we can do is we can continue this next week. This conversation that we started about respectful research. What I really want you to think about as you go forward, as you move forward into next week, is maybe you can reread this on your own and really think about this last question here that Susan Tilley is telling us about. Would you be willing to participate in your own research that you're thinking about, or would you want your family or your loved ones to take part in this research? Why or why not? If the answer is no, then that means there's something about your research that you need to rethink about, your possible research topic, okay? That's what I want you to think about. You don't have to write anything on it necessarily. You just have to think about it. Think about that question, okay? So think really about the design, what Amato was telling us, this idea of design. How are you thinking about designing your research? What is your topic? Why are you trying, what is the goal? What is the outcome? How are you thinking? Who are you thinking of bringing in? Who are your possible participants? And in a sense, would you want to be part of this research yourself? Why? And if not, then it might mean that you might have to rethink a little bit of your initial maybe your initial question, your initial assumptions as well about what the topic is. Okay. I think we'll close it here then, because I hear that there's prayer time. I know that the Learning Center is closing as well very soon. So I know that all of you who are at the Learning Center, Mohammed, Omot, and Hassan, you'll have to leave, I think, very soon. So and return home. So we'll close it here. Any questions that you have, any concerns, jot them down. Please jot them down. Any questions, comments that you wanted to make and you didn't have time to. And next week we'll continue from here. Okay?
All right, doctor.
Sounds. Thank you, Omot. So I hope. I wish all of you a good evening and good night. Take care. Stay safe from I hope that the floods don't impact you too much, and your communities. And yeah, and we'll talk again next week. All right. Have a great weekend. And then all of you, make sure to keep working on your positionalities or research topics. So those of you who haven't yet written anything, please write your research topic. I think that's mostly you, Abukar, because I know that you still haven't written your research topic and why it is important. So please do write something, a first draft of it, and send it to me. Omot and Mohammed Noor, you need feedback from me. I will send you some feedback. Omot, Hassan, I know that you're working on your positionality, so just keep going. Keep writing, keep thinking. Okay. I will see you all next
Okay,
week.
sir.
And have a great weekend, all right? All of you.
Thank you.
Take good care. And again, Ramadan Mubarak to those who have started Ramadan. And take good care, guys. Nice
All
seeing
right.
you.
Thank you. We'll meet later.
We'll meet later, Ahmad.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Dr. Mirko. Bye-bye.